Hi guys, in the previous tutorial I showed you how to make a bubble chart. Now I'm going to show you 4 different ways in which you can format it so that it looks like this one, like this one, like this one, or like this one. So if you have any doubts, you can leave a comment in the section below. Also, you can download the sample file in the description. So let's get started. So the first thing we want to do with this chart is to select it, and then I'm gonna go up to the chart design, and I'm gonna go to the charts layouts, and I'm gonna look for the add chart element, and I'm gonna look in here for the axis titles, and I'm gonna add the primary horizontal, and I'm gonna rename this to profit, and I'm gonna hit enter. So there we go. Now I'm gonna do the same thing for the primary vertical, so I'm gonna go back to the add chart element and I'm gonna click on axis titles, but this time I'm gonna select the primary vertical and I'm gonna change the label to profit margin. Now what I want to do is to change the chart title, so I'm gonna change it to sales and profit. So now I want to change the chart style. So still on the chart design menu, I'm gonna go for the chart styles and I'm gonna pick the style number 6, which is right here, and I'm gonna click it. So it's starting to look a little bit better, and now I want to remove the grid lines. So I'm gonna go back to the add chart element. I'm gonna look for the grid lines and I'm gonna uncheck the primary major horizontal. And I'm gonna do the same thing for the primary major vertical. So now I have removed the grid lines. The next thing that I want to do with my chart is to change the font of it. So I'm gonna select all of my chart and I'm gonna go to the home menu, and in the font section I'm gonna change it to this Arial font, which is a professional looking one, and there we go. Now as a final step for this design, I'm gonna remove the legend. So I'm gonna go down here, I'm gonna select the legend, and I'm gonna hit the delete button. And there we go. So now we're done with our first design. Now what I want to do with my second design is to start by selecting it, and I want to go up to the chart design menu. I'm gonna go to the add chart element, and I'm gonna add the primary horizontal axis and I'm gonna rename it to profit. Then I'm gonna do the same thing with the primary vertical axis and I'm gonna change this one to profit margin. And now I want to change the chart title to sales and profit. Now the next thing that I want to do is to change the style of this chart. So still on the chart design menu, I'm gonna look for the style number 8, which is this one right here, and I'm gonna select it. So now as you can see, I have this dark theme on my chart. Now I don't like the grid lines in this chart, so I'm gonna go back to the chart layouts. I'm gonna look for the add chart element and I'm gonna look for the grid lines. And I'm gonna uncheck the primary major horizontal, and I'm gonna do the same thing for the primary major vertical. So now I don't have the grid lines anymore. The next thing that I want to do is to remove the legend down here, so I'm gonna select it and I'm gonna press the delete button. Okay, so now the next thing that I want to do is to go to the home menu and I'm gonna change the font of the chart. So I'm gonna click in here on this section. I'm gonna type this Sego UI, which is a font that I like because it looks a little bit more professional, and I'm gonna hit enter. Okay. Now the next thing and final thing that I want to do is to go back to the chart design, and I want to add the data labels because I need to know the details of each bubble. So I'm gonna go to the chart layout section and I'm gonna go to the add chart element. I'm gonna look for the data labels and I'm gonna select the center option. So now as you can see, I have my data labels on each bubble. Right now the data label is displaying the percentage, which is the profit margin, but let's assume that I want to show the customer and his sales, because since I removed the legend, I don't know which customer this bubble is representing or his sales. So I'm gonna click in here on the data label, and I'm gonna right click. I'm gonna look for the format data labels, and this is gonna open up the right pane. I want to make sure that I'm on the label options, on this label options icon, and still on the label options section. I'm gonna look for the series name, and I'm gonna click it. So now, as you can see, the data label is displaying the customer's name, which in this case is Jim Morrison, along with his percentage of profit margin. But I don't want the percentage of the profit margin, so I'm gonna look in here for the Y value, and I'm gonna uncheck it. And then I wanna check in here on the bubble size, because this is going to display the sales of this customer. So this will help me to identify the customer and his sales. Now, I don't want the label to display all of the information on a single line. I want them to be separate so that it is easier for me to read it. So what I want to do next is to go to the separator option, and I'm gonna click in here. I'm gonna look for the new line option. And after I click it, you can see that now Jim Morrison and his sales are on two separate lines. Now, as a final step for the data label, I want to change the font color. So I'm gonna go back to the home menu, and I'm gonna look for this option, and I'm gonna select the white color. Okay, so now it's a little bit more visible. Now, since the bubble size is made of 3 metrics, I need to change every single data label so that it looks like this one. So I want to repeat the process with each of my data labels. So now, after I'm done with all of my data labels, my chart is ready. So we're done with design number 2. Now for our third design, we're gonna select it, and we're gonna go up to the chart design menu. We're gonna go to the chart layouts. I'm gonna look for the add chart element. I'm gonna select the axis title first, the primary horizontal, and I'm gonna rename it to profit. And I want to do the same for the primary vertical. So I want to select in here, and I'm gonna change it to profit margin. Now I want to change the chart title to sales and profit. Okay. Now I want the chart to look a little bit different. So I'm gonna select it, and still on the chart design menu, I'm gonna select the second style. There we go. Now I want to change the font of this chart. So I'm gonna go to the home menu, and I'm gonna select in here the Verdana font, which is a font that looks very professional, and I'm gonna hit enter. There we go. And now I don't want to see the legend in here, so I'm gonna remove it, because I want to add data labels that describe the customer name. Now I want to change the colors of these bubbles, so I'm gonna go back to the chart design, and I'm gonna look for the change colors option, and I'm gonna select the fourth option. Okay, there we go. Now, as a final step, and since we removed the legend, we want to add data labels to identify which customer the bubble is from. So we're gonna go to the add chart element. I'm gonna click on data labels, and I'm gonna click on the right option. And there we go. But this is displaying the percentage, and I want the label to show the customer. So I'm gonna select the label, and I'm gonna right click. I'm gonna look for the format data labels, and this is going to open up the right pane. So I want to make sure that I'm on the label options, and label options, and I want to look for the series name in here. So I'm gonna click it, So now the data label is displaying the customer's name. So the last thing that I need to do is to remove the percentage. So I'm gonna uncheck the Y value, and there we go. Now, because this chart is made of 3 different metrics, you're gonna have to change each data label individually because it is not possible to change all of them at once. So we want to repeat the process that we did with Jim Morrison. So after we finish that, we're done with our third design. Now for our last design, the first thing that I want to do is to select the chart, and I'm gonna go to the chart design menu. I'm gonna go to the add chart element, and I'm gonna select the axis title. I'm gonna select the primary horizontal first, and I'm gonna change it to profit. Okay, and I want to repeat the process for the primary vertical axis. And I want to rename this as profit margin. Now I want to change the chart title so that it says sales and profit. Alright, and now I'm gonna select a different style for my chart. So still on the chart design menu, I'm gonna click in here for more designs, and I'm gonna select the design number 10, which is this one right here. Alright, now I want to change the colors of this, so I'm gonna go to the change colors palette, and I'm gonna go to the monochromatic section, and I'm gonna select this one, the gold gradient, dark to light. Now the next thing that I want to do is to remove the legend, so I'm gonna select it, and I'm gonna press the delete button. Now I want to go to the home menu, and I'm gonna change the font of this chart, and I'm gonna change it to this Century Gothic. Now the next thing that I want to do is to remove the grid lines of the chart. So still on the chart design menu, I'm gonna go to the add chart element, and I'm gonna look for the grid lines, and I'm gonna remove the primary major horizontal, and I'm gonna do the same thing for the primary major vertical. Now the next thing that I want to do is to change the background of this chart. So I'm gonna right click it, and I'm gonna look for the format chart area, and this is gonna open up the right pane. So on the chart options, on the fill and line, I'm gonna click on the fill section, and I'm gonna click on solid fill. And in this case, I'm gonna change it to dark blue. Well, now everything is not very visible. So still on the right pane, I'm gonna go to text options. I'm gonna look for the text fill and outline. And on the solid fill section, I'm gonna look for the white color. So now everything is visible. Now as a final step, I want to add the data labels because I don't have the legend anymore, and I want to know which customer the bubble is representing. So I'm gonna go back to the add chart element, and I'm gonna click on data labels, and this time I'm going to put them above of the bubble. And as you can see, the data label is displaying the percentage, which is the profit margin, but I want the data label to display the customer name as well. So I'm gonna click my data label, and I'm gonna right click where it says format data labels, and still on my right pane on the label options, on the label options icon, still on the label options section, I'm gonna click for the series name, and there we go. So since this chart is made of 3 different metrics, we have to repeat the process for each label because there is no way to select them all at once. So now that you know how to do it, I'm just gonna repeat the process. So after you're done with the data labels, we're done with our 4th design. Alright guys, I hope that video was useful. If it was, please don't forget to leave a comment, to like, and to subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything, and you'll be motivating me to upload more tutorials for you. Also, don't forget that you can download the sample file in the description below. So thanks again and see you next time.